Hello, Councillor Santos checking in.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. You're coming through loud and clear.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Brampton Planning and Development Committee meeting. I'll begin with roll call. Deputy Mayor Singh.
Present.
Councillor Santos.
Present.
Councillor Vicente.
Present.
Councillor Quarbra.
Present.
Councillor Keenan. Councillor Medeiros.
Present.
Councillor Fortini.
Present.
Councillor Tour. Present. Councillor Power. Mayor Brown is not. We have approval of the agenda. Is there any members that would like to add, change, remove, delete anything with the agenda? Seeing none. City Clerk, there was a last-minute revision to the agenda.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. The revised agenda, which is republished online, has added item 6.3, which is a delegation regarding item 7.1 on today's agenda, a representative from Watson and Associates regarding the development application fee review.
Approval of the agenda has been moved by Councillor Vicente. All in favor? That carries. Declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Any members would like to declare a conflict of interest? Seeing none. Any online? None. Our next item is the consent agenda. I don't think there was anything eligible. Maybe there is.
There may be, Mr. Chair, there's item 7.2 on today's agenda, which there are no delegations. Item 7.6, 7.7, 7.8, and 8.1.
Any members like to hold any of those items? I will read them out for clarification. 7.2 is a staff report, draft plan of subdivision application to amend the zoning bylaw 10365 Gore Developments Limited, Fieldgate, Glen Schnarr and Associates, Inc., 10365 the Gore Road, Ward 10. Consent. You said 7.6, Mr. Fay? Is an application for draft plan of subdivision amend the zoning bylaw Emerald Castle Developments, Inc., Cache Developments, Glen Schnarr and Associates, 10431 the Gore Road, Ward 10. Consent. 7.7 Application for draft plan of subdivision amend zoning bylaw, Sheridan Capital Management Corp., care of Candefcon Limited, 10635, 10647, and 0 Gore Road, Ward 10. Consent. And with 7.8, application for draft plan of subdivision amend zoning bylaw, Sheridan Capital Management, care of Matthews Planning and Management, Inc., 10797, the Gore Road, Ward 10. Consent. Committee minutes, 8.1 Heritage Board, summary recommendations, November 21st, 2023. Consent. Now go to our first statutory public meeting. Staff presentation, application to temporarily amend the zoning bylaw, Depoche Management Limited, 1217246, Ontario, Inc., care of Celeste Salvena, 0 Queen Street, East, Ward 8. Is there anybody in attendance today that would like to hear a presentation on this item? Again, it's a staff presentation, application temporary amend the zoning bylaw, Depoche Management Limited at 0 Queen Street East, Ward 8. Anybody in the audience that would like to hear a staff presentation? That item is adjourned. I'll bring forward 7.5, the staff recommendation at this time. Are there any members like to have any questions about the staff recommendations? Seeing none, it's been moved by Councillor Power. All in favor? That carries. Our first public delegation is the possible delegation site-specific amendment to the signed bylaw 3992002, Manor Bay Estates, Trinistar Corporation, 8750, the Gore Road, Ward 8. And we have any delegations on that item?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are none registered with the clerk's office. No one in the audience.
Seeing none, we have to receive that or no?
No, we can move on.
7.3, report. Is a staff report, site-specific amendment to the signed bylaw, Manor Bay Estates, Trinistar Corporation, 8750, the Gore Road, Ward 8, that the report from Ross Campbell, Manager, Zoning Bylaws Services, Building Division, Planning and Development Committee of December 4th, Manor Bay Estates, Trinistar Corporation, 8750, the Gore Road, Ward 8, be received and that a bylaw be passed to amend the signed bylaw 399-2002 as amended to permit the proposed sign-specific amendment. It's been moved by Councillor Power. All in favor? That carries. Our next item is the possible delegation site-specific amendment to the signed bylaw 399-2002 as amended, Centennial Mall Limited, 227 Vaughan Street East, Ward 1. We have Eric and Vince, Centennial Mall Brampton Limited, that are here to put forward a delegation. Do we have them online? In the audience? From Centennial Mall Limited. They're not online nor in attendance. I'm going to stand it down and just come back to it, just in case. Our next is a delegation from the for development application fee review update. Peter Simcisco, Watson and Associates Economics Limited. Peter. Please come forward, Peter. You have 5 minutes. And you have a presentation that we're going to pull up. Okay.
Perfect. So if we could start right on the next slide, please. So good evening, everyone. And so firstly, to provide a little bit of background on the development application fee review, the city completed an internal audit which concluded that the city is currently under-recovering the costs of service in certain areas. Further to that, earlier this year, Council gave direction to look at the potential for capping of the fees charged on zoning bylaw amendment applications. On the next slide, to date, we have worked closely with city staff to complete most of the prerequisite technical analysis and modeling, and we then honed in on the zoning bylaw amendment applications, given council direction in that regard. On the next slide, we see that there are several types of applications that are within the scope of this review, but for today, we are focusing exclusively on the zoning bylaw amendment applications. On the next slide then, to just highlight a couple of things with respect to the legislative context for this review. The charging of fees for planning applications is governed by the Planning Act. Specifically, Section 69 of the Planning Act gives municipalities the power to establish fees, which may be designed to meet the anticipated cost of the processing of each type of application. On the next slide, we're illustrating that we employed an activity-based costing methodology. And with this approach, we are quantifying the cost of service by looking at the effort that is spent by staff across the organization on processing applications. The approach also recognizes the indirect support and overhead costs, as well as capital costs that the city incurs in the provision of services. On the next slide, in addition to the technical analysis, we also completed a benchmarking exercise to understand other municipalities' fees and how those fees are structured. And then on the next slide, before we get into the costing analysis itself, the highlights of the benchmarking exercise have been that there are really two rate structures that are typically used by municipalities when it comes to zoning bylaw amendment applications. We either see flat fees that are differentiated by application complexity, or in other cases, we see a base fee that's used in combination with a variable fee imposed on a per-unit basis. And that's the rate structure that the City of Brampton has used historically. On the next slide then, we have illustrated how the total fees payable vary as the number of residential units within the scope of a zoning bylaw amendment application increases. And what is quite clear from the chart is that the city would rank amongst the highest of the surveyed municipalities, regardless of the unit count. On the next slide, we also took a look at the difference, or the ratio, if you will, between the highest fee charged and the lowest fee charged. And the takeaway from this is that out of the surveyed municipalities, the City of Brampton has the biggest ratio between the maximum fee payable and the base fee. So shifting gears to the costing analysis on the next slide, first we needed to understand the amount of processing effort and also how that varies. And ultimately what we identified is that it takes approximately 386 hours of staff time to process a very simple zoning bylaw amendment application, and approximately 602 hours of staff time, which is about 56% more to process a very complex application. So on the next slide then, looking at that, or translating that processing effort into costs, that shows that it costs the city just under $41,000 to process a very simple zoning bylaw amendment application, and approximately $64,000 to process a very complex one. And so having looked at that costing analysis, or the results of it, on the next slide, we have a summary of the three rate structure options that have been developed for the city's consideration. On the next slide, the first option maintains the existing rate structure in terms of the base fee and the variable fee per unit, but reduces the maximum fee. On the next slide, we have the second option, which most closely reflects what we found through the effort estimation exercise, in that the size of a development seems to have relatively little effect on the effort required to process an application. It's more related to the complexity, which is driven by the location. So for example, is it an infill versus a greenfield development? And then on the next slide, we have the third option, which would be a simplified rate structure that maintains the current base fee, but replaces the variable fee with a uniform per unit fee and reduces the maximum fee below current levels, but somewhat higher than under option one. The illustration on the next slide shows that with any of the three options presented, particularly with options 1 and 2, the city would be more in line with other municipalities in terms of the ratio between the highest and lowest fees payable. And then just to wrap up on the final slide, there's a little bit of further work needed to flesh out through the second phase of this review. Firstly, we're going to be looking at processing efficiencies that arise when there are applications being processed concurrently, and how that may impact the fee structure, and also the effects of the enhanced pre-consultation process on application processing intensity and therefore costs. And I think that's all the time I have. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Peter? Seeing anybody on line? No? Okay, thank you very much for your delegation. I will bring forward item 7.1 now, the development application fee review. Any members of council have any questions of staff about the development application fee review? Anybody online? Nobody in person? So it's not here today to make any decisions. It'll be coming back in the end of Q1, beginning of Q2. But I would like to bring committee's attention to the fact that essentially Watson's come before us and provided us with some information. The information is based around what we've essentially asked for, was to bring our fees down. What we have in there, though, is the comparables of other municipalities that are essentially built out or don't have the building out to do that we have, especially Mississauga, Hamilton. So if you took their fee structure back when, you know, it was way back when, nobody was complaining, everybody complained about it, but essentially they continued to accept those fees. We know that growth doesn't pay for growth. Our development certainly doesn't pay for growth. So all of something to think about when we're making these decisions. The reduction in the fees of the bigger applicants that essentially I think are paying for the fees of the smaller applications and increasing those fees, I don't know if that's what we want, but it's something for us to look into and really see what we want to do to, one, see if we're competitive out there or, you know, if we're in that best place. So something for us to think about, again, in the end of Q1, beginning of Q2. It's here for, to be received. I'll go back to see if there are any questions. Seeing none. Been moved by Deputy Mayor Singh, receiving the development application fee review. All in favor? That carries. Our next item is 7.4, staff report, site-specific amendment to the sign bylaw as amended, Centennial Brampton Limited, 227 Vauden Street, Ward 1. Anybody on the board that would like to discuss this item? I'll look over to Councilor Vincente, move this item. The report from Ross Campbell, Manager, Zoning Bylaw Services, Building Division to the Planning Committee be received, and that bylaw be passed to amend the sign bylaw 399-2002 as amended to permit the proposed sign-specific amendment. All in favor? That carries. Item 7.5, staff report, application to temporarily amend the zoning bylaw to Pochi Limited. Did I bring that item forward already and move it? So I'm just repeating myself now. Referred matters. Anybody have any questions about the referred or deferred matters? Seeing none. Item 11, correspondence, none. Councilor question period. Any members have any questions about anything related to the agenda today? Anybody online? Public question period. Any members of the public would like to come down and ask any questions about any of the items that were raised, discussed here today? Anybody online? Seeing none. No closed session. Councilor Tour, move adjournment. All in favor? Our next regular scheduled meeting is Monday, January 15th, 2024, 7 p.m. So we'll go ahead and say we'll see you next year. All in favor? Carries. Have a great night, everybody.